Today's lesson is about the communications revolution. And the question we're going to think about today is, can information on the internet be both reliable and accessible? So obviously you have begun to learn about what sources can we trust and what sources can we not trust. But the question about the availability and accessibility, while at the same time questioning the validity of information. Just because you saw it on the internet, obviously it's not true, but we live in an age where information is more accessible than ever. And so what does that do for us as individuals? And so that's what we'll be exploring today. But first, let's jump back a little bit. In the 1940s, we first started using computers. I'm sure you're familiar with these. They were very primitive, took up entire rooms, and they were only able to do simple calculations. They used an enormous amount of power, and because of that, they put off an enormous amount of heat, and they needed room-sized air conditioning systems to keep them cool, and yet they only did basic arithmetic computations. Now, of course, as time has gone on, power sources and devices have gotten much smaller and more powerful. Personal computers and even today's cell phones can perform more powerful and complex operations than the first giant computers. They're also far more affordable. So it's pretty exciting that a device the size of the palm of your hand can do more than a building-sized machine could, operated and purchased by the federal government during war. And they're more affordable. You know, where in the 1940s only governments could afford these things, now individuals can. And while the latest technologies were once only affordable at great cost, now they're the price of a few days' work.
This episode of Life Noggin is brought to you by Auto. Hey there, welcome to Life Noggin. Thanks to this wonderful thing called the internet, you are watching this video right now. But how did the internet get to where it is today? There is so much internet history that we couldn't possibly get to everything in this short of a video, so we're definitely going to have to make a second one. Anyway, let's get started. The internet actually got its start over 50 years ago, and computers back then filled up entire rooms. Scientists and researchers used it for years to communicate during the Cold War. It was useful because if one computer went down, the others wouldn't follow. In 1962, a scientist named J.C.R. Linkletter proposed the idea of a network of computers that could talk to one another. In 1969, the first ever message was sent from one computer to another over the ARPANET, the government's computer network at the time. ARPANET stands for Advanced Research Projects Agency. One was located in a research lab at UCLA, and the other at Stanford. All the message said was log in, and it didn't fail to crash the network. Stanford only received the first 2 letters of the message, but hey, you gotta start somewhere. By the end of the year, only 4 computers were connected to this network. In 1971, the University of Hawaii's Aloha Net was added, followed by various networks in London and Norway 2 years later. Also happening in 1971, Ray Tomlinson was developing the first system to send mail back and forth between users of ARPANET. This would eventually be called electronic mail, or email for short. The @ symbol was used to tell a person's name and the host name apart. With all of the networks floating around, there needed to be a way for all of the computers on them to communicate with other networks. This is where computer scientist named Vinton Cerf comes in. He invented a way to introduce computers across the globe to each other in a virtual space. This invention was called Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, which was followed by Internet Protocol, or IP. In the 80s, scientists used Cerf's protocol to send data back and forth, but the 90s is where it really all began. In 1991, a computer programmer named Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. This wasn't just a data sharing space for scientists anymore. This was an entire network of information that was accessible to anyone with an internet connection. Now, you're using a browser right now to watch this video. Some of the popular ones are Firefox, Google Chrome, and Safari, but in 1992, Urwise was created. Urwise was an internet browser and the first to have a graphical interface. A few browsers came before and after, but in 1993, Mosaic was created, and it would popularize surfing the web. Mosaic influenced many of the browsers to follow, including Netscape Navigator in 1994. This became the most popular web browser at the time, accounting for 90% of the web usage in 1995. In the early 1990s, companies like AOL and CompuServe were starting to provide dial-up internet access. Dial-up is a method of connecting to the internet via a telephone line. Your telephone line was plugged into a modem, and the other end was plugged into the phone jack. There was a period in history where you couldn't use your telephone and the internet at the same time. Without the internet, we obviously wouldn't have things like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. But way more importantly, we wouldn't be able to access information in seconds. We wouldn't be able to communicate with people from around the world, share ideas, and educate those who might not get a chance elsewhere. Also, without the internet, I'd actually have to talk to someone when I order a pizza, which, by the way, was the first thing ever purchased on the internet. How would your life be different without the internet? Let us know in the comment section below. This episode of Life Noggin is brought to you by Audible. Go to audible.com/lifenoggin to get a 30-day free trial and one free audiobook download of your choice. If you want to learn even more about the internet, we recommend this amazing book, Tubes, A Journey to the Center of the Internet. Make sure you come back every Monday for a brand new video. And if you want even more Life Noggin, check out these other episodes and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Links are below. I'm Blocko. This has been Life Noggin. Don't forget to keep on thinking.
And the Worldwide Computer Network, as you heard, was in its infancy in the 1960s. And it was developed out of necessity from the Department of Defense as scientists had a need to network devices. And number one, this was to protect our national security by storing our vital information in several locations in the event of a Soviet first strike. Now, throughout the 1980s, the National Science Foundation also created its own network, as you saw, was called the NSF-Net, and anyone was able to tap into this network. And while at this time, through the 1980s, the interface with this network was very complex. You had to understand code, and you had to be able to communicate with the computer in a non-visual way, using either binary or DOS or various other early programming languages. And so essentially, unless you were a hobbyist or a computer science graduate, you were not going to be able to network online. Yet where this digital revolution really began to take off was as thousands of industries across the country began to use computers to run their businesses and had the need to network, and as millions of Americans began to buy personal computers. Apple released its first computer in 1984. It had a graphic interface, which is what we're operating with right now, meaning that you can see the commands you want to give to the computer. In fact, right now I'm going to give this computer a command. Now I'm going to give the computer another command. The computer translated my very simple graphic interface into a complex string of code that told the computer what operation to perform. That code is called an algorithm, meaning a series of steps laid out in a very precise manner, detailing exactly what has to be done. Because you see, a computer has no artificial fuzzy logic. Now, fuzzy logic is what allows me to determine that Alex is falling asleep. A computer couldn't determine that otherwise. A computer can only follow exact steps. So it is not yet at the point that it can make rational decisions, and so it has to follow these commands. And where this really became exciting is where the commands became more graphic in nature, meaning that we can operate by clicking buttons on a computer, and where more people were able to interact online through the World Wide Web, because this NSF-Net eventually grew into the Internet, and the most popular interface that we use is the World Wide Web. Now, in 1999, 80 million Americans were logging onto the Internet at home or at work. Around the year 2000, 60% of U.S. households owned at least one computer. Today, almost all Americans use the internet on a daily basis. Now, we're not there for all people. I still know people who don't use the internet, period, who are not connected at their home, and I'm sure you do as well. However, most people, for business, for work, for education, for daily use, social media, use the internet on a daily basis. And most every business in the country is going to be digitized in some way to handle its daily operations. Now, technology has had a significant impact on the economy. For one, the astounding economic growth of the 1990s can be largely attributed to this technological revolution. Computers allow us to perform simple tasks more efficiently. We can do education and communication and business more quickly and easily than ever before. And this has allowed productivity and output to increase dramatically. We can get far more done in this classroom with computers than we can with paper and pencil. We can get far more done using computers and email in regards to communication than ever before. Now, technology has obviously had an impact on our daily life. Many of us buy goods online through a variety of services. Some of us, you can even buy everything you need online. You can have your groceries delivered. You can have your daily essentials delivered, toiletries, dog food. You can schedule car mechanic work online. In fact, there's very little you can't do online these days. Now, projections for 2016, I made this last year, were that 327 billion transactions would occur online in the year 2016. That's B with billion. That means that every person on the planet would conduct several dozen online transactions this year. Now check this out. At the turn of the century, only 13% of classrooms had internet. This was my senior year of high school. I watched the very first computer lab get wired for the internet my very last semester in high school. It was an exciting thing. The browser was called Netscape, which you saw on the little video, and to go to a single website took about 5 minutes or more. The very first website I went to was Nintendo.com. I wanted to read about the new Nintendo 64 and get some cheats, if possible, about the new Zelda. I was pretty excited about it. Well, just to go to that one website to read very simple articles about a video game that I was excited about took 5 to 10 minutes. And then sometimes it would crash. So it was very unreliable. It relied on dial-up modems that were called 56K. That meant only 56 kilobytes per second could be transmitted, which, if you know anything about wireless technology, that's really slow. Today even cell phones operate by gigabytes. By the fall of 2005, nearly 100% of classrooms had internet. So at this point, I was finishing up my undergraduate work, and I was beginning to see classrooms that had digital projectors. They were still a rather new concept, but it was an exciting proposition because I could begin to develop lessons that had a digital component. And today, you can even take classes online. Now, you could take classes online in 2005. I took my very first online class in 2005. It was very primitive. It was a series of assignments. No digital interface, no videos to accompany it, no communication with the professor, yet a series of assignments. No Turnitin.com. just a series of assignments. It was pretty substandard, and today online courses and what they can offer are pretty exciting, depending on how much effort the instructor decides to put into it. Now, legal challenges. The internet is largely an unregulated domain. In fact, it operates in much the way as international waters. The internet, as a result, has few regulations governing it, and it has become often a center, unfortunately, for the spread of pornographic material as well as hateful material. Sadly, many people have become, quote, radicalized through online communications, meaning that people have begun to read very hateful material online. Because let's be honest, if anybody can be creators of information, and if we're not careful about what sources of information we access, then we can begin to expose ourselves to some rather dangerous material without even thinking about it. And that's one unfortunate consequence. Another is cybercrime. Identity theft. With access to exciting free applications, these often come at the cost of placing our personal information at their disposal. You know, that simple little click this red button. Oh, we'll know who you are and we can access your profile and your information and even your friends' networks. That's why you get to play those fun apps, is they're data mining. They're data mining for your personal information. In some cases, hackers have destroyed or disabled entire computer systems, and cybercrime costs the global economy over $500 billion every year. And so what do we mean here by cybercrime? Well, the illegal downloading of music has essentially changed the music industry. The illegal streaming of music, the illegal streaming of movies, identity theft, stealing of people's personal information, even bank accounts. Sadly, these things occur on a regular basis. Cyber-terrorism. We are at an age of digital warfare. Hackers can steal information. This information can even be vital military or nuclear codes. Now, as the technological revolution was going underway, there was this notion that there would be a digital divide, that computers would be too expensive for the average individual to afford, and it would be another situation where the haves have access to this technology and the have-nots do not. Because in 2003, what we found is that 20% of poor Americans owned a computer. So that very few people who were not well-to-do could afford access to technology. You know, for example, when I was growing up, in the late 1980s, I saw my very first personal computer. And I quickly learned DOS, MS-DOS, which is the Microsoft Digital Operating System. Taught myself the programming language so I could interface and play my video games. From a very early age, in the late 1980s. Why? Well, because I thought it was cool. And I wanted to play my video games. And that was the only way I could. Well, the closest computer was in my grandparents' house in the next state. So I only got to see it a few times a year. But I was so enamored with this technology. But I didn't have access to it because as a poor young child, just didn't. They were very expensive. That simple computer, which was called a 286, that was the name of the processor, very, very primitive by today's standards, was over $600. That's $600 in 1980s money, which is a lot. Now, very few people owned computers, yet today, most Americans, as you can see, have smartphones. Most Americans have some type of digital technology. Now, some states have programs to teach computer skills to welfare recipients, to homeless people. Some communities even offer free wireless internet. For example, last time I was in Robbinsville, where Miss Stewart lives, I was over there paddling a river. I stopped at a local restaurant. The town of Robbinsville has free wireless internet. You can tap into it anywhere within their city limits. Pretty cool.